Welcome back to Alpha Recap, your quick, clear take on what moved markets after the close. Markets closed mixed today, and we've got regulatory headlines, governance filings, and a hot semiconductor ETF that grabbed headlines. As always, if you have questions, you can reach us at stockalpha.ai.
Good to be back. Lots to unpack. What really stands out here is how different catalysts, safety inspections, proxy filings, and targeted fund flows all showed up at once. Feels like a busy news day.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's start with Boeing. Indian regulators flew to Seattle to look at fuel switch testing ahead of an Air India crash report. That was the headline that really pulled aerospace into the spotlight.
Right, and the immediate takeaway was regulatory risk ramping up. Analysts note that on-site inspections often precede tougher operational constraints, slower certifications, or extra disclosures. That can push back delivery timelines.
Exactly. Delivery schedules matter to earnings and to how investors price execution risk. So when regulators start asking questions, you have to model in the chance of certification delays, potential extra testing, even reputational hits.
And when you step back and look at this, that risk doesn't stay isolated to one company. Geopolitical or legal headlines can nudge flows toward defensive names across aerospace and defense.
There was also an exclusive report tying a visa intervention to higher geopolitical sensitivity for defense contractors. A reminder that headlines beyond testing can affect the whole sector.
Not a great day for execution risk names, right? When those narratives heat up, analysts note multiples can compress because people demand a premium for risk.
Short reaction.
Big move.
Let's shift to Microsoft. They filed a Def 14A proxy this week. That's the filing companies use to lay out governance items for shareholders ahead of votes.
So, why does that matter? Proxy filings can be short-term volatility triggers, even for mega-cap names. There can be debates over board seats, executive pay, shareholder proposals. Analysts watch for activist chatter.
Right, and it's worth explaining to listeners. A proxy is basically management asking shareholders to vote on governance questions. Those items themselves aren't investment advice, but markets reacted in the past when contested issues popped up.
Short reaction.
Hold on, say that again?
Proxy seasons can move big stocks.
Now to the ETF story that caught a lot of attention. The Corgi Lithography and Semiconductor Photonics ETF amassed assets very quickly after launch.
It reached more than $150 million in assets in less than 2 weeks. That's rapid for such a narrow thematic product.
Yeah, and that rapid accumulation says two things. One, investors want targeted exposure to lithography and photonics, the niche parts of the semiconductor supply chain. Two, big inflows can improve liquidity and narrow bid-ask spreads for the ETF itself.
People moved fast on that one. When a thematic ETF gets traction, market makers tend to step in and trading gets easier, which can attract even more flows.
Quick reaction.
That's momentum.
Let's pull those three headlines together. Heightened regulatory oversight with Boeing, governance watchfulness with Microsoft, and concentrated flows into a niche semiconductor ETF. Those set the tone for the day.
Agreed. Okay, thematic roundup time. On semiconductors and photonics, the ETF inflows are one signal, but there were also industrial demos. Innovi showcased battery cell contacting and flexible printed circuit tech at the Battery Show Europe.
Right, and those demos matter because they're the step before pilots and purchase orders. Analysts say equipment shows can foreshadow capital spending cycles in fabs and battery plants.
So, what really stands out here is investor interest aligning with industrial activity. Both flows into the ETF and demos on the factory floor suggest capex could pick up for next-gen manufacturing.
Turning to energy and utilities, Hydro One filed leave to construct applications with the Ontario regulator for transmission work supporting local industry and agriculture. That's the start of a multi-stage regulatory timeline for building.
And a market forecast from Future Market Insights projects the static VAR compensator market to reach about $1.67 billion by 2035. That's a multi-year signal of demand for reactive power equipment as grids add more renewables.
Which connects to what analysts have been saying. Grid modernization is a multi-year capex theme. Utility filings and equipment market projections together create a clear demand pipeline for power electronics and integrators.
Now on to AI and enterprise software. We saw two interesting moves. First, OneMind launched an AI that can join live sales calls as a visible sales engineer. Second, a small-cap public SaaS company is transitioning customers to a subscription answer engine optimization product called Poseidon.
Let's break that down in plain terms. The OneMind tool is basically an AI assistant that sits on sales calls and helps the rep in real time. If adopted broadly, it could reduce the need for a human specialist on every call, speeding deal cadence.
And the subscription shift matters because recurring revenue tends to smooth out visibility into annual recurring revenue. Analysts often prefer the predictability of subscription models versus one-off projects.
Pattern check. AI is moving from back-end automation to customer-facing roles that can directly affect revenue. That's a step change in commercialization.
On corporate governance and institutional flows, there were a few notable items. Morgan Stanley increased a stake in Central Asia Metals to about 7%, which typically draws attention. And Goldman Sachs upgraded Brambles after a subcontractor exited.
Institutional moves like that can be catalytic, especially in mid and small cap names where ownership concentration changes liquidity and investor focus.
Rapid-fire market and corporate updates next. Walmart hit an all-time high at $134.71, underscoring retail resilience.
Pfizer filed a PRE 14A, and the filing referenced a dividend yield of just over 6%, which is something income-focused investors will notice.
The Corgi ETF's $150 million plus in assets could improve liquidity, as we said. Innovi's demo at the battery show is one to watch for pilot announcements or purchase orders. And the leveraged ETF, TZA, rose about 1.7% on extremely high volume, almost 400 million shares, which is a reminder how volatile leveraged products can be.
Short reaction.
Watch leverage closely.
Let's summarize the emerging trends analysts are flagging. First, regulatory intensity returned to the front pages. Testing inspections and proxy filings are both catalysts. Second, concentrated flows into niche ETFs show investors using thematic wrappers to access parts of the tech supply chain. Third, AI commercialization is accelerating into client-facing roles. Fourth, grid and energy capex remains a multi-year theme. And fifth, single institution moves and analyst research can refocus attention.
Yeah, that tracks. Those are the big picture threads I'd take away from today.
What to watch next? Follow-up statements on the Air India crash report and any certification or testing updates tied to Boeing will be market-moving. For Microsoft, watch the proxy details, ballot items, and any shareholder proposals. For the Corgi ETF, watch holdings disclosures and whether NAV and market price diverge with large inflows.
Also watch Locify's customer migration metrics tied to its Poseidon rollout. Any pilot announcements from Innovi after the show, Hydro One's regulatory milestones, and whether Morgan Stanley files more disclosures about its stake in Central Asia Metals.
Quick takeaways before we close. Regulators can move markets quickly, not just through fines or bans, but by creating execution risk. Proxy season matters even at the biggest companies. Thematic and narrow ETFs can scale fast and change liquidity dynamics. And AI is moving from the margins into revenue-facing roles.
Final thoughts. Analysts note these are informational signals, not investment advice. Data suggests increased volatility around these catalysts. So scenario analysis and risk budgeting are important for any portfolio considerations.
If you want to dig deeper on any of these stories, head to stockalpha.ai. And remember, if you have questions about anything we covered today, you can ask us directly at stockalpha.ai. We'll answer live in the Q&A feature.
Thanks for listening. For more market analysis and insights, visit stockalpha.ai. We'll see you next time on Alpha Recap.